Hey guys, Duke Nougat 3D here. Now I've talked about a lot of shit on my channel. Mostly American shit, lots of uncommon shit. Hell, I've even talked about World War I era prototypes, so my channel is no stranger to strange masks. But today I have something a bit on the even stranger side. Oh yeah, this is a mask that has been so entwined with weird lore and just mystery that even the first gen collectors set it up so that basically everyone has been calling this thing the wrong thing since its inception, because today I have for you a M9 field protective mask with an early black C48R1 facepiece. Now before I get into the history, I'd like to especially thank Moulage and Older Masks Are the Best for helping me with the research, going to the National Archives and getting reports on prototypes for this mask, and for Moulage for scanning a Bart Wilkes's 1951 copy of Technical Manual 3-205, the gas mask, which really helped a lot with understanding the development and the really weird designation choices that we went through when designing the M9 series. And today I'm going to be clearing up a lot of the myths and rumors that surround the quote-unquote black M9 face pieces, because boy oh boy, there are a lot of things to cover. So I hope you're all ready for some rambling, because we're about to dive into the most diabolical display of designation dysentery the likes of gas mask collecting on YouTube has ever seen. So, that all out of the way, let's go way back, 1943 or 44 or so. Well, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology was busy finalizing the M5, or rather at that point, the E637 Army assault gas mask in time for the upcoming Operation Overlord. They were working on another series, which was designated the E19 series combat service masks. They had a similar principle to the M5 in that there was a side-mounted canister molded into the facepiece. It used the similar triangular eyepieces, an M8 outlet valve, you know, C4 style harness, what have you. The only catch was, instead of making use of existing deflectors of a M3 or M4 style face blank, where they basically come up the sides and into the eyepieces, the C19 series was unique because instead of doing that, they basically reworked the entire front of the mask to have an exceptionally larger nose bulge, which was actually its own deflector system where the airflow was deflected across the nose instead of underneath the chin, and this resulted in a better airflow, which allowed for greater clarification of the eyepieces while in use. However, there was a catch. It was very difficult to produce because early prototypes basically patched them on by hand and revulcanized on new rubber, similar to how the canister stems and the hose stem blanking plugs were added to the M5 series combat service masks in their production. So the concept was kind of developed on the back burner, and there was no way it would be ready in time for Operation Overlord and the invasion of Normandy. So this is the mask that got used on Normandy, obviously, but all the while this mask was under development at the time. On March 7th, 1945, we have the most detailed report on basically one of the prototypes that became this mask, known as the C19R25, or the MIT C19R25 M11, to be precise. And it was quite similar to what you see here. Basically the M9 style face blank. They had actually, at this point, they developed it so that the entire face blank was one piece injection molded, and it had the canister on the left or the right side. Obviously, it used a C15 style outlet valve without a pull tab. However, these early prototype C15s had a rubber extension which extended. It was basically a sleeve which extended back over the wire and tape for additional coverage for whatever reason. And additionally, it used a C4 style harness with the triangular vinyl material head pad, and it essentially that it was also produced in a universal size rather than a small, medium, and large. The E19 series went through a lot of different facepiece and hardware changes throughout its development, and we're going to get into the culmination of all that later. So, the E19R25 was basically very similar to what you see here, except that the report details that the face blank was made out of black neoprene rubber, similar to the M5, although it looks very similar to this, so it could have been a misinterpretation. I'm not entirely sure. There's a lot of weird misconceptions, but for the sake of going off of the text, I'm going to say that the C19R25 was neoprene. And They tested it with 3 different carriers. They tested it with the E19R2 carrier, which was actually sort of similar to the forerunner of the later M11 carrier. There was the E20 carrier, which was essentially a copy of the British light anti-gas respirator style carrier, where the mask would basically need to be squashed in on itself and the canister removed prior to stowage. And of course the M7 and M7A carriers, which I've already touched base upon with my my last M5 combat service mask review. You could go ahead and check that out if you want to know more about the M7A carrier. But anyhow, they had determined that the M7A carrier was the superior of the 3, owing to its quick don time and its relative waterproof capabilities over the E19R2 and the E20 carriers. You could go, I'm going to go ahead and leave a link in the description to the gas mask wiki article on the development of the M9, where it'll basically cover everything I'm talking about here. But ultimately, the final pattern got eventually developed into what became presumably known as the MIT E19R49 facepiece. And this last facepiece had a few major differences. One is that the facepiece material was changed out from neoprene rubber to BUTYL. Yes, that's right. The M9 was originally made out of BUTYL rubber. So anytime you see a black M9, it's actually BUTYL, but I'll get more into that in a moment here. And the E19R49 also did away with the older C4 style harness and upgraded it with a C8 harness, which would be later finalized on the M9 pattern mask. Now, the M7 carrier was totally overhauled because they realized with this outer rubberized coating, it had a susceptibility to basically all types of abrasion. This rubber coating would be worn away, and they also had issues with the rubber coating being reflective, and they really didn't need that in the field. So what they did was, instead of rubberizing the outside, they only rubberized the inside, and they basically made the exterior out of a duck canvas material, and the end result was known as the C48R1 carrier. That's the final designation. Another thing I should point out, there is, touching base on the myths and rumors surrounding this mask, everyone tends to call this mask the E48. That is not true, because going through the 1951 technical manual of TM3205, when the M9 field protective mask was adopted in December of 1947, it also came with a new designation change. You see, the older designation, as you would know, was mask plus filter plus carrier. So the original designation was intended to be M911-7, I believe, but they later changed it to the M9 the M9 gas mask when it was adopted in 1947, and the facepiece had a different designation from the kit. That is right, the mask was originally not called the M9, the entire kit was called the M9, just the M9 gas mask with a C48R1 facepiece. Now, the designation C48R1 presumably means Component 49 Revision 1, alluding to being standardized off of the MIT E19R49 facepiece. This is getting very confusing, I know. But essentially, the original production run of the M9 field protective mask used E19R49, or rather C48R1 facepieces. God, this is even confusing me. That used black BUTYL rubber as their main component. And the reason for this is because BUTYL was not as affected by colder temperatures as, say, neoprene was. And the reason for also using BUTYL is because it was an artificial rubber, and this is during a weird transitional period where the US was just starting to regain its stocks of natural rubber, as the Japanese occupation of the South Pacific relinquished those precious resources of natural rubber, and the US was beginning to set up production of the C48R1 facepiece in the normal white rubber as we know it now. So technically, by 1948, the M9 gas mask could either have a black BUTYL C48R1 facepiece or a white natural rubber one. And this is a very early example because it makes use of the original prototype molds, which have the manufacturer's stamp on the chin, similar to World War II masks, rather than up here underneath the left temple strap as with normal production runs. Really, there isn't too much else to say about it, but I guess I'll go into the details of the kit. I should also mention that these black BUTYL face pieces started to die down sometime around 1952 or so, because the latest that I've seen Black BUTYL M9 face pieces produced was 1952. And these face pieces are, a couple of these late dated BUTYL face pieces are actually in the hands of Pixel Productions and the collections of Jojo. I can't pronounce his last name very well, apologies, but I'll go ahead and link what I can in the description to them. But anyways, moving on from that, so effectively why there was Black BUTYL M9s is because, again, natural rubber shortages were just beginning to alleviate themselves, and the US was gaining access to natural rubber again. And so when you see a black Facepiece M9 or a BUTYL Facepiece M9, do not automatically assume it is a prototype or experimental, because it could very well be just a C48R1 for the early production M9 field protective mask, or M9 gas mask as it was called. And presumably after 1951 or so, when the Army adopted the M9A1 field protective mask, the C48R1 designation became obsolete, because in later publications of TM3-205, specifically the 1955 publication, the Facepiece began being referred to as the M9, just as the entire kit would be. So that pretty much puts an end to that. It is not an E48. It is not a prototype, although there are prototypes out there, just not in private hands that I know of. But what you have is a very early M9. So that being said, let's get into the Facepiece and the kit here. I don't really need to show off the carrier that much, because again, it's literally just an M7 carrier made out of olive drab duck canvas, which is rubberized on the inside. Pretty much the same identical principle. Really the only difference, I'll take this face form out, is that they added a large pocket on the back of the carrier, which I doubt you're going to be able to see on camera, which would hold various accessories like the individual gas protective covers and other things of that nature. So moving on, let's get into the kit itself. Obviously the mask would have been supplied with an M11 combat canister. This Facepiece is not actually mine. I should go on a limb and say this belongs to Retro Respirators. He actually sent this to me for restoration, and I'm just basically making a video on it now before I start restoring it. And basically what I'm not going to do anything with the lenses. I bet you can see that there is a shattered eyepiece here. He told me explicitly I do not need to do anything with that, and so I will not. What I'm just going to be doing is removing rust from the canister threads and basically replacing the harness, or rather restoring it, because I'm going to be swapping hardware with a trashed M9 Facepiece and carefully unstitching this head pad here because the normal C8 harnesses, as you can see, have a black canvas head pad, and this one is gray, similar to the earlier M2A1 style harnesses from World War II. So I'm going to be doing the best that I can to preserve as much original hardware as possible while adding new hardware from the period. So let's look at the mask itself. So as mentioned, this is made out of BUTYL rubber. It is very strange to hold a mask from the late 1940s, which is made out of a material that most modern gas masks are made of today. Very soft, sort of tacky black rubber, which has a very prominent shine to it. I haven't cleaned it up yet, so it'll probably be even shinier by the time I'm done with it. You can see a production lot number stamp, AA285, on the side there, and you can see the marking on the chin, or hopefully you can. This Facepiece was made by Firestone in 1948. I doubt you can see that, and there is 5 dots indicating this is probably made in the 5th month of the year, which I can't name off the top of my head because I'm a dumbass, but you know what I mean. And then you can see USM stamps on the forehead because they later upgraded the universal designation to small, medium, and large. And really, other than that, it's just a black BUTYL M9. The only other thing to notice externally is the nape strap, which as you can see is broken off and very poorly corroded, but it used a leather tab system similar to the C4 harness, and they later did away with that with a canvas tab. So moving on to the inside, there are no internal markings, oddly enough, but you can get a good look at the nose cup, which is actually very much identical to the final pattern M9s. For whatever reason, the glue is broken on this nose cup, and I can basically peel it back and just show you all the details. I'm going to be cleaning all this out because this glue is basically peeling away. I'm going to be re-gluing this all in, cleaning all that out, and basically making it look new again. I'm re-riveting the harness, etc., etc. Nothing really needs to be said about this. It is what it is. It's just an M9, a very early M9. Also interesting to note is the C15 exhalation valve, which is the early pattern, which does not have a pull tab for easy opening in Arctic climates. And yeah, it's just a very early C15 valve. So not much else to say about this, but just, I guess, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know while I'm handling this thing, or sometime after, I suppose, because I'll probably have most of this mask ingrained into my memory after this interaction, because this undoubtedly is a very rare mask. This is like the only one of this type that we know of outside of the Fort Leonard Wood Chemical Warfare Museum archives. So what you were looking at is a very rare, impossibly, and I mean impossibly rare kit. I cannot stress that enough. So, like, the fact that I managed to find 3 ATs is kind of a testament to how rare this thing is. Because, again, I don't know of any other examples outside of government archives. So, that being said, I hope you learned a thing or two, or if you didn't, that's okay too. I hope you just enjoyed seeing a very rare kit that I'm restoring for a good friend of mine. So, that being said, before I ramble on any further, I'm Duke Nukem 3D. If you want to learn more, check out the description below where I link all my sources, and I'll see you all later.